Okay, Kingscrusher's radio show. Welcome. We're going to look at Carlsen Nakamura. So it was a Queen's Gambit declined, and I think Nakamura might have been suffering from jet lag. He seemed to get in trouble early on in this game. After C takes D, that was a bit of a surprise, the exchange variation. Magnus is someone's saying no sound. Oh dear. No sound. Sorry, to those on Chessbase, is there no sound? Is there sound? Davy Gravy, good evening. Do you hear anything or not? Does anyone hear anything? I might have to log out and log back in. Any sound? Oh dear. Right, and I'll log out and log back in. Okay. If I oh, sorry, pressing start would help. Sorry, can you hear anything now? Is there sound now? I press start. Sound now? There should be sound now. I think I forgot to press start. Oh, this isn't the best start. Sound? Yeah. Okay. Good. Sorry. Let's go back. So Nakamura's first round. I think it's too hot today. That's my excuse. I think I have to open the window before I die in this room. It's quite hot today, and apparently it's going to be like much colder tomorrow. So we've got kind of schizophrenic weather going on here in the UK at the moment. But the humidity is like an intense summertime day at the moment. So Queen's Gambit declined, exchange variation. This bishop e7 is avoiding, White obviously playing bishop g5. And does White really want to play knight f3? That's the big question. If White did play knight f3, then you'd think he'd carry on normally, maybe with bishop f4, maybe e3, maybe, bishop d3. But already there's aggressive intent from Magnus's play already, a move 4, which shows you should really be alert in the openings. If Magnus has already got this aggressive intent that maybe after bishop f4 he's indeed just going to simply try and castle queenside, queen c2 and castle queenside. So that's a very aggressive intention already. So Black plays c6, which not only bolsters the d5 pawn, but later often Black will play b5 and b4 if White does castle on the queenside. But that might carry some strategic risk that sometimes a knight can use this c5 square. But Magnus plays this plan anyway, that queen c2, knowing well, first he's ruled out also bishop f5, and he's made possible castling queenside, and he's made possible this battery against h7 later. So it seems fairly logical, natural move to play queen c2 if you want these aggressive intentions. And maybe Naka didn't react ideally here. I think he was criticised with this zigzag maneuver, bishop g4. So this could be jet lag, that he was just a bit knackered. So Naka was knackered because he's just travelled to this tournament, first round. And I think he said in this interview he's not happy with his play so far. Even though he won in the second round, he's not really happy at the moment with his play. So maybe he needs to get his rest and get back into it. But okay, so what did Magnus play here? Magnus he wasn't tempted to kick the bishop or anything immediately. He just played he played e3. So the bishop is stopping White castling queenside anyway. If White wants to castle queenside, the bishop's going to have to be kicked. Okay. Right. So, Grunfeld on livestream has written that Carlsbad pawn structure is confusing for me. Okay. Right. So bishop h5, bishop d3, bishop g6. so in fact, you see that if we looked at that, this move, sorry, bishop h5. So without waiting for f3 or h3, the bishop is simply zigzagging just to exchange off. So it's like, you know, Naka just wants to get rid of this piece. He's a bit worried about this piece maybe. And he doesn't care about not waiting for a kicking move, you know, like f3 or h3. So that's kind of interesting. And, you know, maybe you'd think intuitively, though, that when black gets these double pawns like this, and you capture usually towards the centre, although Fischer sometimes captured away from the centre, really depends on the position, whether you take HG or FG. Really, you know, sometimes FG is justified. But HG, you would think, really, you know, without this attacking bishop, and no battery exists, right? And furthermore, you might think, you know, actually, the pawn's actually usefully, you know, guarding h5. So you wouldn't think h4, h5 to be a particularly effective plan later. So, so anyway, castling queenside without his attacking bishop. So where's the venom? I mean, how many of you would have thought that there's a lot of venom left in the white position? By the way, Nakamura recently enjoyed this 1.5 hour YouTube video I did about how he won the ICC Open, and in that I continually emphasised actually in many games he did like exchange off this bishop for this bishop, but that was in like the French defence, advanced variations, where it's particularly effective because if there's a pawn like here instead of e3, then often f5 and c4 are weak. But this is a totally different, you know, position, and the exchange of light square bishops is much more controversial here. White's, you know, completed nearly his development, nearly connecting rooks, and you know, maybe, you know, h4, h5 will be in fact dangerous. So we'll see. So knight f6, and this move now f3 reminds me of how I think Botvinnik was playing this system against the Nimzo Indian. Often Botvinnik would play, you know, doubling the pawns, which strengthened the centre, which meant that f3 and e4 and e5 was possible later. And that's usually when you've got, you know, control of d4. Otherwise, you know, d4 collapses. But that's the basic idea. And here it would seem that the mechanism here of playing for e5 to dislodge the knight on f6 would mean actually in turn that h4, h5 would be made more effective if there's going to be a coordinated attack on h7 later. So that's something to bear in mind. This knight, if it's dislodged, it probably spells some issues for black. So this plan is not to be underestimated. By the way, good evening, Antares. You seem to be the second highest rated player in the room at Chessbase. What do you think of the black position? You know, speak up, you know, if you want. What do you think black's okay? Who thinks black's okay here? Is this really a big problem, this e4, e5? Any of you speak up with any questions at any time. But if I asked you what the evaluation of this position is, do you think white's already better here? What do you guys think of this? Have I been too optimistic with White's plan that he's simply going to play e4 and e5? What do you reckon? Anyway, Naka's not too keen to immediately castle, in this case anyway. From livestream there's a couple of questions. Actually, Davy Gravy. Sorry, are you both on Chessbase and thing? Sorry. No, there's a couple of questions. Couldn't black have just played king f8 and g8 from McAveen? And Davy Gravy, slight advantage just as a quick glance. On Chessbase, Dukas is saying black is behind in developing. Sorry, Dukas is 57. I don't... right. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else have any comment here? We'll go on. So knight bd7 doesn't look like a fatal move, does it, to anyone? Knight bd7. In fact, you could say knight bd7, you know, maybe as part of an aggressive campaign, you know, knight b6, knight c4 with b5, you know, bolstering that c4 square? Isn't that part potentially of an aggressive campaign? You maybe even knight f8 to e6, you never know. The e6 square is available for knight rerouting. Wesley writes, it's perhaps besides the point. I'm thinking about Simmel's rule that if the pawn chain indicates the wing you have to play, the pawn chain might indicate quite a bit here. And in fact, you know, Naka's going to use his pawns here. After knight ge2, he's not cast... Oh dear. Sorry, after knight ge2, he's not still castling. He's delaying casting. He plays a very aggressive move now, b5. Now, I remember looking at the Queen's Gambit declined and thinking, is there a really aggressive system I can find? And this was years back. And I remember looking at games of Chris Ward, who's a grandmaster now. I think he was an IM at the time. But he was British champion one year. And he had this system where, you know, it looked as though he was going for a kingside attack. But as soon as players went for this b5, b4, you know, he would often get a nice knight to c5 and just bind Black's attack by keeping control of the c5 square. And that seems to be much the case, actually, in this game, that b4 comes with an issue that the knight doesn't have to humbly retreat back to b1, and of course it can't go back to e2 unless this knight moves. But if that knight moved, then the g pawn will be blocked. So you've got to figure out, this knight, is it really going to go to a4 and then c5 later on when the trigger is made for b4? If you can get a bind on c5, then you can carry on with your attack on the king side. And what is it that's said in The Art of War and in Nimzovich, that before you go on to the attack, you must put yourself beyond defeat. So Nimzovich talks about prophylaxis and putting yourself, consolidating position before going on to the attack. And we see that here. This is almost like a demonstration of that. That White will first put himself beyond defeat on the queen side where his king is placed, and it's always very exciting when you get these positions where the kings have castled opposite sides, but there needs to be prophylaxis on the queen side. And this sort of game has already occurred, and I think we've gone over another game between these two with opposite side casting, and Magnus did the same sort of thing then. You know, he played in the Sicilian king b1 and king a1, almost putting his position beyond defeat before going on to the attack. But here, okay, he's waiting for the b4 move. He doesn't need to move his h-pawn yet. Yeah. So Ducatus Wright 657 writes, I think Nakamura knows he's behind in developing, and that's the reason he's trying to attack, even if he is weakening his position. That's true, but if he's behind in developing, without White having the light square bishop, is there really, without the pressure, can you really say that this chain is exploitable, or even the h-file? I think the problem for White, that White poses Black now after e4, it's uncomfortable, this e5 idea. So it seems even without the seemingly, you know, the soul of the position's gone, the light square bishop, it's not the case here. There's further fun to be had now from chasing this knight, or, you know, from away from f6. So Naka now, he plays that trigger move, b4, finally, here. So we have here now a new target for White, an exploitable target, the c5 square, which is also tactically significant because he doesn't want to be torn to shreds necessarily on the c-file with his king sitting on c1. So this next move, you know, is defensive as well as strategic. Knight a4. So now Naka, he takes on e4, which might be an issue, I suppose. He must have a specific idea behind this by taking on e4. So f takes e4. And now we see this move queen a5. And here is, you know, I think this is a clear example to put yourself beyond defeat. The Art of War, or Nimzovich, consolidating the position. How would White do that on the queen side? There are certain moves which could be a lot of pain for White. So first you need to secure the c-file and c5. So you do that with king b1. perhaps not fearing b3 here. b3 you might just be able to take with the queen. So after castles, now Magnus didn't waste a move with rook c1 quite here. He started his attack campaign in this position. He played actually the move h4. Sorry, we have some questions and comments here. So Dukas57 on Chessbase is say taking is bad because now look at the two pawns in the centre. Yeah, you're right. These two pawns look menacing, but the thing is, if the e5 pawn moves, you would think black gets the d5 square for a knight. That might be, you know, compensation. You would think maybe, you know, the d5 square. MacVeen on livestream. I don't understand b4. Why not rerouting the knight to e6? And b4 might be because Naka wanted to attack the queen. Groomfield writes. Okay. So do we all think b4 was a blunder? Then he's followed it up with queen a5, and I guess he was hoping, which is not going to happen, I suppose, for Magnus to try and, you know, weaken his position with b3, but that's not going to happen because, you know, basic knight b6 could expose, you know, a-file issues. You know, the knight could be very bad, or I suppose there's knight c5 there, but he doesn't want to do a weakening move b3, and that's clever that he avoided that. So here Naka plays the move rook fe8 as if, you know, maybe there's some useful pressure going on here. Maybe after bishop f8, e5, you know, maybe he's considering that knight d5 will be a comfortable knight post, you know, if it's placed on d5. So he seemingly doesn't mind at all this e5. But of course, if the knight's dislodged, then h5 is not controlled by the knight on f6. So h5 is going to be quite piercing with the queen and the pawn. g6 is going to become a major issue here. Oh, we have a 2612 with us. Patwitz. Hi, Patwitz. Are you a title player? Sorry, who are you, Patwitz? 2612. Did you already see this game? I'm pretty sure you saw this game. Hi there. Anyway, okay. Sorry, Sanyan writes, what about 17 taking on e4, d4, queen a c8? Sorry, I'm not sure. 17 d takes e4 after castles. Sorry, after h4. Have you got a suggestion here? Oh, knight takes e4. Oh, that's the idea. You were saying knight takes e4. Queen takes e4. Queen takes a4. I think the bishop's hanging. Queen takes e7. But then, I don't know, rook e8, you might think. But then queen takes d7. So rook takes e2. Okay, you've got to defend c2. Maybe rook c1 here? I don't think there's a perpetual with rook b2. Although that's looking pretty dangerous. I'm going to manage to lose this as white now, aren't I? Have I managed to lose this position with the white pieces? I'm sure there's a way around that. Hold on a sec. So knight takes e4. Does someone want to get an engine out? Just in case I really embarrass myself, which I already have done probably. Queen takes e4. Queen takes a4. So we're saying queen takes e7. Rook e8. Takes. Actually here, what about just b3? No, b3 queen a2 mate is embarrassing. Oh dear. No, not b3. What would be a good defensive move here? Probably rook d2. And then there's no attack after rook d2. That snuffs out the attack, doesn't it? Everyone convinced? Everyone's convinced by that, yeah? Rook d2. Sanyan, are you convinced that you're a piece down now with black? There's no attack here, is there? Yeah, Rook d2 I think is better than what I said before. But I'm just going to turn the light on. One moment. Sorry. Okay. Greenfield writes, Carlsen seemed confident he was better at this point during the interview with Rogozenko. Okay. Right. So that was interesting. Knight takes e4. I guess that had to be calculated a bit. Knight takes e4. Maybe if the circumstances were slightly different, it would have been a fantastic decoy. So rook fe8, e5. So even without the light square bishop, white's still blasting black on the king side now. So knight d5, and it starts to look uncomfortable after this next move, h5. So there's coordinated pressure now on g6. If the h file opens up, we all know from our blitz games the h pawn is often very effective. But does black have any threats like b3, you know, and knight b4? Does that not come into consideration? Well, it seems Naka's main concern is the stripping open of the h file here. So he tries to keep the lines closed. He plays this move, next move, g5. So trying to keep the h file with the pawn on it. Now the clever thing here is, well, rather clever thing is h6. So just offering a piece, because I think this hg is going to be crushing. But let's just check that specifically. So we can assume it's crushing. It looks fairly crushing. So h takes g7, I assume. So immediate threat of mate. And this looks to be impossible to defend. But let's give it a go. What if knight f8 here? I think just maybe taking is enough. So if bishop takes, there's queen h7 mate. And if king takes, then rook h8 will probably be its mate again. Okay, so that's no good, knight f8. There's no other defense here. So basically, I think he can't really take the bishop. Is everyone completely convinced that after h6, the bishop cannot be taken? Everyone convinced? Because of hg. That seems fairly convincing to me. Yeah? So, knight f6, someone's mentioned, to give the piece back. Knight f6. This one? Knight d7 to f6. Right. Sorry, after g takes f4, pardon me. So g takes f4, hg7, knight d7 to f6. There looks to be a problem with this. Right, let's just take here. So we're forcing knight takes f6, aren't we? As an example. Was that the right way to play it? Maybe just knight takes f4 is really dangerous. Could this be really dangerous? So the idea is that it's still winning. Yeah, there's rook h8, but then takes, so there's no time for rook h1. So there must be some specific refutation here, which I'm not seeing at the moment. Does anyone have a specific refutation? You know, if rook h8 check here, King takes g7. Oh, sorry, look at this. Sorry, this is also on live stream. This broadcast, some people are following from live stream as well. But I'm relaying what they're saying. I'm relaying what everyone's saying anyway. So, can anyone refute this move? Anyone? Any ideas? Someone's Mac Veen on live stream's written Queen F5, but that's a bit slow, isn't it? Queen F5. Okay, who's got an engine? Someone put this through an engine. I can't turn on an engine. I'd crash this machine. Someone put it through an engine. This is that what engine's saying? Queen F5 here. Is that the engine move? Rook H8 and Queen G5. Ah, so the idea is Rook H8 and Queen G5. Right. Yeah, Queen G5 is a menace here if the pawn's taken. So you get black to take the pawn, and then it's all over. I see. Because then you get this mowing down of the king. Oh, hang on. I've just managed to lose all the pieces. sorry. Queen F5. Maybe E takes. Is anyone checking this with an engine? How do you finish off the position here? So we just assume it's easy to finish this off. E takes F6. There's no Queen F5 here, is there now? Because of the Queen's on it. Are you just saying Knight takes F4? I think that's what I said earlier. Maybe Knight takes F4. The situation on pawns, White's a pawn up after Knight takes F4. And, maybe D5 next and Knight H5. So lock up the Queen from H5, play D5 and then play Knight H5. Get rid of this defensive piece, and then the Queen and Rook should be able to do the job. That sounds convincing, doesn't it? Do you want me to show you? Give me a defensive move for black here. Anyone? Defensive move for black. Let's prove this. Defensive move for black. Go on. Try and blow up the white position here. Okay, someone on live stream saying, okay, going for Rook D8. Okay, I'm not playing Knight H5 immediately because you've got the Queen on there. So I'm going to play D5. Yeah? What does black play here? Do you want to play C takes just as an example? B3. Okay. Okay, I'll take that. Next. There's no Queen G5. It's illegal. That's the point of D5. I'm blocking your use of Queen G5. Oh, instead of Rook D8, Queen G5. Oh dear, oh dear. No, hang on. I think I'm winning your Queen here. One sec. Check. Knight. No, there isn't. I'm not winning your Queen. Oh dear. So this is why, under the scenes, this game's so complicated. Naka made it look... Carlsen made it look really easy. But we've got this massive variations, it seems, under the scenes. So we're saying Knight 7 to F6. Who's got an engine here? Just stick it into an engine and tell us, please. Please. How does White win here very clinically? There must be a clear win. Anyone? Okay, great. We'll just take on f6. So knight takes f4, queen g5, and I don't know. How does white continue? Is it just better for white? Mo83. I check queen f5 and the engine says mate in 11. So, Mo, where was that? Was that in this position? Sorry, knight f6. Are you saying queen f5 here, Mo? Forget taking the knight. Queen f5 here. I would crash my machine. I can't put on an engine. Actually, isn't there a threat here, guys, of queen h3? Like this. You can mate on h8 here, can't you? With queen h3 as the pivot square. Yeah, finally. So it's up to me to find all the technical resources as well. I'm not just your positional guru, am I? You want me to slog to find specific technical resources as well? Is that the case? So we're convinced now, aren't we? Is everyone totally convinced? You know, black's getting mated here, yeah? So here's an easy variation. Takes, check, and this will be mating. So you look like this, mate, yeah? So that's very convincing. And so what does anyone want to play with black here then to try and defend? The defensive resources are overloaded now, aren't they? Sorry, in this position. After queen f5, it's gone, isn't it? All right, let's move on. Okay, so now we know. Right, now we know. So g6. Okay, so we've got this dangerous, pawn here. How is that used? Well, the bishop now retreats. Okay, and maybe it's going to be useful later with b3 and bishop b2 one day in the future. I'm not saying anytime soon. Knight 7 b6, and now white uses that control of the c5 square. So there's knight c5. Okay, where is black's attack here? Where is black's attack? Naka felt he needed to play bishop takes c5. He is weakening e5. He's trying to win that e5 pawn and then put pressure on the e file. Or is he? After takes, he first plays the move b3, which might, cause the b file to also be an issue. But note the bishop on c1 is defensive on b2. So queen takes b3. With the king sitting snug at the moment, because that lovely bishop at home defending, b2. And now Naka takes on c5, and you'll notice this e pawn is weak, right? You'll notice this b file is potentially scary. But white's assets, this pawn is dangerous. And also he can use d4 as a pivot square now to gang up on g5. So this d4 is a useful pivot square if black is indeed going to play rook takes e5 soon. So knight d4. Now if black doesn't play rook takes e5, then what will be black's plan here? He played rook takes e5 in the game. What about if black played, say, rook b8? Do you guys immediately see any refutation of rook b8? Would you say e6 is dangerous? Because I'm wondering e6 is going to get blasted with knight c4, and all of a sudden this looks kind of menacing for black. This for white, this position. This can't be right, can it? E6. What would you play here if black had played rook AB8? Anyone? Oh, sorry, Decadus writes, why retreat to C1 when you can place it at D2 and pinning the pawn? Well, I think C1 just protects B2. On LiveStream, McAveen writes Queen F3. But this square, you know, is being protected by the knight on D5, protecting F6. So knight C4. Isn't this really dangerous for knight checking and knight checking and, you know, queen? Ah. Yol writes Queen H3. It seems a bit slow on live stream, these suggestions. Queen H3, isn't that a bit of a slow move? John Nunn used to always say about moves being slow. I don't know, Queen H3, again, Knight C4, and you're going to get hacked. Aren't you? What would white play here? You're faced with like Knight A3s now. Sorry, we'll go back to Queen F3. Knight C4. Say Knight C4. Check. What about King H8? Doesn't white have a very dangerous looking... Sorry, so there's some dangerous problems here, aren't there? Alright, okay. Sorry, okay, this is a tactical test for everyone. What do you guys play against rook AB8? Naka seemed to play rook takes E5. Was this the right move? What about rook AB8? Did he have an attack after all? Alright, sorry, E6. Someone's saying Mo83. You're saying E6 in this position. So after knight C4 you play E takes F7. Right. That does look dangerous. So takes, check. And you're saying knight B3 here. I'm starting to be convinced, because now on the cards is like check, and if their rook takes D5 and queen F6 to get onto these dark squares. So knight B3 blocking, you know, the stuff. Knight B3 good. Okay, so E6 would be devastating. Does everyone agree? E6 must be the right move here. But if takes... Maybe queen H3. So knight C4 is always answered by knight B3. And again, there's problems here. Maybe with stuff. Maybe rook D5 is on the cards again for queen C3 check if the king was on H8. Possibly that sort of thing. Okay, so E6. Naka may have been worried about E6, so he plays rook takes E5 just to get rid of that pawn. So no E6. Gone. Pawn's gone. Okay. So we'll carry on from here. So now knight F3. So black's not given any time now. If he just had an extra move, it looked dangerous. Rook B8 and knight C4. So rook E2. Sorry, Mo83 writes, after FE6, queen D3, G6 is weak. Sorry, queen D3, G6 is weak. Sorry. Alright, let's just check that again. So rook AB8, E6 takes queen D3. That's a good point. Okay, that's another good point as well. Alright. So knight takes G5. And now Naka is faced with horrible threats quite quickly. So checks and maybe queen f3 hitting f3 and f7. So f7 seems vulnerable because of queen f3 here. So Naka's next move actually protects the rook and defends f7. But now this move, queen d3, unveils a threat, queen d4. And g7 will be a problem with this pawn. The problem with this retreat, you know, this retreat, this queen retreat, you see some of the fear I would have had with white has gone, that there's no knight c4s now. You know, this knight c4 was protected by that queen on c5. That poor queen's gone back to e7 to defend f7 all of a sudden. So I think this might have been a blunder, this this rook e2 business. You know, instead of rook e2, maybe just rook e7. Just to be able to still play knight c4. But again, you know, rook b8 you can now take. So that's, you know, is the rook maybe going back all the way to e8? So you can play, you want to play knight c4 and rook b8, ideally. But there seems to be problems with f7. So white could just take, you know, rook b8. There'll be queen f3, just hitting f7. So I don't know. So all of a sudden it's not so clear. And black looks to be more defensive now after queen d3. So he goes totally on the defensive now, approaching move 30. I don't know if he's in time pressure as well. So he plays another defensive move. Instead of the poor rook, you know, being on the b file with the glorious knight c4, all that's a distant dream. It's just stuck behind the pawn, threatening nothing, put in the box on f8. So Carlsen's on the attack. Magnus is on the attack, and his next move almost threatens now immediately. Bang! Rook takes f7, rook takes f7, queen g6 I can imagine is on the cards. King moves, knight f7, etc. Or h7. It's very dangerous for rook f7. So this provokes f5, which also gives black, you know, queen f6 is now possible if the rook wasn't, like, you know, maybe in some lines. But the rook is also a constant pain. But now the engine analysts at chessgames.com were crying out for this next move. So this next move looks dead simple now. But white seems to have bypassed all the horrors of an attack on the b file. You'll notice that poor queen, you know, was on c5. This was a threat. It's all a distant dream what black had. This rook is now poxy on f8 instead of on b8. This rook, I don't know what it's doing on e2 because it's justifying the bishop protecting b2. So black's attack has been cut through, and now white's pushing his own attack now with g4. White's forcing his own agenda on the game with g4. He's starting to rip open the lines against the king. So Naka flings in a knight, as though, you know, maybe, you know, there's going to be a knight c3 at some point, or maybe a queen b4, or maybe the rook might return to b8. But now queen d4 is a very concrete move, threatening h7, just winning on the spot because the knight's like on f7. So h7 is threatening to win on the spot. So now the queens have to come off to parry that, it seems. Well, Naka's next move defends against h7 check. It seems queen e5, just blocking. So if h7, there's king g7 is possible. Takes the queen off, and now he's using the g file after all that. G pawn just to open g file. So g takes f5, and we've still got problems now for black, unfortunately. So one question here, could he took with the g pawn, could he have taken with a rook? Say he takes with a rook, is that a disaster? It probably is, isn't it? Check, Is that the move? Maybe that's not. Oh dear, tricky again. So what happens, guys, if rook takes f5? What would have happened? Is there a clear win here? Can anyone see a clear win? Fork, someone screams on, sorry, fork on live stream. Wesley writes on live stream, fork. Anyone else? Go on, give me the refutation. I'm wondering myself if it's to do with b3, you know, and bishop b2, because this diagonal is dangerous. So something like check, you know, maybe just taking. So g takes is forced because otherwise h8. And then just fork, knight e6. So that's not possible. h7, the king can't go to g7. So what if it went to h8? Takes. What about b3 here? Just going to go on that diagonal. No, check. That's blocking that for a bit. So in this position, king h8. What would you play in this position with white? Anyone? Was h7 actually the correct move? Sorry, there was no other move here, was there? It was h7 as the move. Is that correct? Rook d1 on move 36. Rook e1. Rook e1 from Mo83. Rook e1. Oh, that carries with it a dangerous threat. Right. So rook f8. What would you play here? Anyone? Quite a complicated game actually, behind the scenes. b3. Yeah, you can try for this bishop b2. Then there's check. Rook takes g5. Why not rook takes g5? Bishop takes g5. Falbano asks why not rook g5. Is rook bishop takes g5? Rook e6. Gaga Cat's rook e6. That looks quite convincing now. At least we're finally double attacking something. 2 pawns. That looks pretty convincing to me. Okay. So we're all convinced, yeah? So that's the way forward. No, it's protected by the king. There's no king takes h7. On b3 there's check, you know, and I don't know. So I think this rook e1's the most convincing actually, personally. I like the look of rook e1. So let's go back. G takes was played. So we have now simply knight f3 in this position. Knight f3. So I'm blocking the G file for a beautiful little combination. Check. And now check. Okay, so if takes takes. Well, we'll play through that. That would force takes, so then there will be bishop h6 winning the exchange. So check, and it looks to be all over because, unfortunately for black, the white knight can go to the edge of the board. Knight on the rim is dim, but not in this case, because now knight h4 is menacing knight g6 as a major threat. So rook e8, now knight h4, threatening knight g6 mate. And Naka played rook takes g7 and just resigned here. I think this is quite clear cut. That h takes and knight takes f5 is really menacing like threats. Okay, and if king h7, I think you could just play check and rook h8 here. So you're forcing through, I mean, queen. So knight h4. So that was a pretty intense game behind the scenes, I think. Let's have a look in overview and summary. So simple Queen's Gambit declines. So bishop f4, if you want to play the system as white, just play bishop f4. You're not developing these pieces. You're going to castle queenside rapidly with queen c2. And you're going to sort of not worry about losing your fun piece, the bishop, because the fun can still happen here, because you've got this plan of f3, e4 and e5 later. So you're going to play for f3, e4 and e5. And also you're not worried about b5, b4, because you're going to play knight a4 and you're going to do prophylaxis on the c file to keep a bind on c5. So this is not a problem. King b1, you've got control of the c5 square. Then you start tearing open the king position on the king side, first dislodging this key defensive knight away from f6. So you start shredding the black king position. So this is how to crush kings by Kingscrusher. How to crush kings. Do you get it? So h6, yeah. So the King's Crush is beginning here. It's evolving kind of nicely. So g6. So you just stick your bishop at home. That protects b2, because now there are terrible threats on the horizon, which after knight c5 you're going to get the d4 square, which is a nice pivot square for the attack, and the dark square bishop. Okay, so you get a nice pivot square, and this diagonal, generally this queen's going to sort of maneuver to d4 later. So we're going to witness this lovely maneuver now, starting with queen d3. So the idea is queen d4 to g7. It all looks quite easy, really, doesn't it, if you look at it like this? So rook df1, threatening rook takes f7 and queen takes g6 as well. So the wonderful centralized queen does a lot of things, as well as threatening queen d4. There's rook takes f7 as a threat here. And now the final phase, shredding the black king to bits with g4. So this opens up lines like the g file is going to be the decisive final road needed to get to the black king. So here the major threat is h7. You don't mind queens coming off. The attack rages on into the endgame with simplified material. Even if you're only left with 4 bits, the key is don't panic. You still might have the attack. So you still got the attack, and you can still play combinatory blows like rook g7. So even in this simplified position, it can still be completely winning. So rook hg1 carries with it the final menacing threat of knight h4 to g6 mate. So that's played, and around about here your opponent would normally like resign. We're just following for a theoretical game continuation after that. So I hope you enjoyed that. Any comments or questions? Otherwise, I'll see you next week. All right, thanks very much. I'll be here for the next 2 or 3 minutes. So yeah, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week, going in detail over this game. A lot of defensive resources behind the scenes. Check out also youtube.com Kingscrusher I've got loads of videos, of course, on YouTube.com Kingscrusher. Tons of videos. I've also got a live stream on livestream.com Kingscrusher. And yeah, so I enjoy kind of doing videos and stuff. Check them out. Okay. Thanks very much.